Alright, so for this lesson plan, I did my world religions lesson, which I know some of you have seen, as I mentioned. Originally this was created for the NCS lesson theme for our methods class, and I don't know why, I just kind of got captivated by Prezi. So I decided to kind of play around with Prezi, and the Prezi playground with world religions information is what I came up with. And the primary idea, I guess, behind this was to move away from what I had been using Prezi for, which was an alternative to PowerPoint, an alternative presentation program, and instead create a place, please forgive the alliteration, for students to actually do work. And I think that was, I felt was the focus of a lot of our mini studios, is that, yeah, we could use these tools for ourselves, but that there's also a value for student learning. And so the World Religions Lessons Plan kind of changed form quite a bit. I mean, I kind of kept some of the same elements, which was originally supposed to be, it was just going to be used as a presentation device, and I could present the information I wanted. Instead, it became a place where there was information provided, but it was left to the students to create the path. And so that's kind of where it all came from and how it all developed. The lesson plan itself is fairly straightforward. It happened to coincide with the release of some results from a Pew Forum survey, which was inspired by this religious knowledge quiz that a professor that I knew at Boston University was giving. And so that's kind of the opener. I know there's a lot of concern about timing with regard to that, and I completely agree. From there I move on to word clouds, using that as kind of a sacred text exploration, looking at themes and words and key concepts and ideas and names and beliefs and things like that through word clouds. And once again, there is a big concern about time. This particular lesson plan has gone through a couple iterations where there's two sets of word clouds. One set of word cloud, I think a lot of it will depend, as Dr. Hicks pointed out to me in an email, there is a concern about time, but the only way to know how to deal with that is to actually teach it and find out what works and what doesn't work. I mean, sometimes the best laid plans will go awry because you discover something doesn't work as well or works perfectly and takes up more time than you'd like. So there's that concern. The big concern when I first started teaching this lesson was actually introducing the unit assessment, which is the Prezi. And I just didn't have time to actually introduce the assessment. I've tried to create more time and leave in more time for students to play with what's there prior to actually having to create it. So, once again, like Hicks said, the only way I'll know if that's a big concern is actually trying it out in a classroom. So that's that. I mean, there is a concern with Prezi about how time intensive it can be. I think one of the major advantages to the way I'm doing it now is a lot of the information that students can use is there. They don't have to create much. In fact, very little creation is needed. I mean, most of the key concepts and knowledge and answers to the questions that I want them to look at are there. They just have to find them there. And then it's a matter of arranging, creating a storyboard, if you will, and creating the path. And yeah, creating a path can be time intensive, But when you don't have to create the content, you can focus a little bit more on the path and making the space interesting and doing fun little twists and turns and things like that, and adding videos and whatnot, those kind of supplemental things that are not as important but can add a little bit of flair. And we can kind of see that through the student example, part 1, 2, and 3 that I posted. So there's that. What else? I mean, then there's the other fact of screencasting. As I mentioned before, I ended up having to use Jing for my screencasts for the student example because Screen Toaster wasn't working, which was quite disappointing. Because Screen Toaster has a number of advantages, namely the ability to easily upload to YouTube and etc., etc. So, I mean, that's something to consider. The other major pitfall with Jing is the 5-minute time limit. So, I mean, there's definitely places where I need to explore, try, and be aware that some things may not just work like we want them to. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of the major things that I'm seeing with the lesson itself. And then I end with a little closure activity which kind of sums things up a little bit, but not directly related to the Prezi. So, with regard to goals, I guess, for future learning, I guess the major goal is to just to try it out. I have had the opportunity to use Prezi as a presentation tool in the classroom this last fall, and I could tell that a lot of students were interested. There are even some students who were familiar with the program itself, but by and large, I'm not sure many students are familiar with it. And given our own experience, given the experience with my wife and others, there is kind of a learning curve involved with Prezi. So any kind of assessment of Prezi as a project may need to factor in that learning curve piece, that the first few Prezis may not look as nice or as polished as we want them to, or we expect them to from the students. So I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, definitely something to consider about with regard to the rubric is that kind of learning curve with regard to Prezi in particular. Screencasting is a little less worrisome. I guess the biggest problem with all of this, of course, is availability of technology. I mean, there's sort of an underlying assumption with regard to the assessment and the lesson itself that there are computers in the classroom. And sure, once I'm in a classroom, I may discover that I can do these same things using a computer lab, but actually having laptops or computers in the class is definitely going to make it easier. So there's definitely something to consider. But as with most things, the best way to go about handling them and addressing them is to try it out. And some of this stuff I just won't know until I'm in the classroom. So it'll be really interesting to see if I can incorporate Prezi at all in the middle school this spring. So that's kind of my review of my World Religions lesson plan for Digital Humanities. Thank you.